skill involved. I'm more than pissing off the crowd. This is awesome. I'm Jim Groom. I'm an instructional technologist, and this is my talk, EdTech Transmissions. The title, We Control the Vertical and the Horizontal, comes from actually this. Let's just take a second, and hopefully it will load quick enough, and we can watch it.
Your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur, or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind.
So one of the things, this is the beginning, for those of you who don't know, to the outer limits. One of the things that really fascinates me about this intro, and also sets the frame and the metaphor for my talk today, is this idea that in the 60s and 70s you had this TV show kind of pretending to take over your television. Changing the volume, rolling the image, and this notion that you could remotely control and take over transmission of a TV, was a kind of this mythical idea. It was kind of part of the whole vision of the outer limits, but it's my kind of conceit that that's not a mythical idea anymore. We as instructional technologists, we as EdTech people can do this in a wide variety of things. And I'm going to actually tell you a narrative today about how at the University of Mary Washington we've done this on in several different media, which I think is really exciting, and that kind of narrative is still being written. The first one is actually the first media I'll talk about today, and let me just change this manually because it's still in the video. But the first media I'll talk about today is an open publishing platform that we have at University of Mary Washington. And how many of you, anyone know what the movie this is from? Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou, right? And this is Pappy. And Pappy's like, this is when he goes into the radio station. Remember the Soggy Water Boys? They're singing, and that's an amazing scene. And then he goes in, because he's not doing, person-to-person politicking anymore, right? He's mass communicating, right? That's a great sound. That's a great. We ain't one at a time in here. We're mass communicating. And what's interesting to me about the web right now is we are mass communicating. We are broadcasting in interesting ways as universities that we never have before. But also, the kind of challenge is to both do that and also keep it intimate. And we've had some actually interesting experiments with this, and many of it is revolving around this publishing platform. This is UMW Blogs. This might be the reason why I'm here today. And what this is it's actually an open publishing platform at the University of Mary Washington that lets anyone, professors, staff, and students, create a site based on whatever they want. They could be a course site, it could be a personal site. And it's interesting, us leaving it wide open and letting anyone do anything they want with it has really taught us how this system works. And it's really been very kind of beneficial for our community because we haven't defined it. We let them define it and then work around it. And we learned a lot from it. It started in 2007. We had about 100 users, and we were mainly using it for course sites because that's what we were experimenting with, is getting out of the LMS environment. And now we have 5,700 blogs and 7,900 users. That user number is interesting because we only have 4,000 people on campus. So it's been going on long enough that we have kind of these legacy users who are still in the system, and many of them who are still using the system's blogs, which is interesting. I mean, we talk about open educational resources, and people have talked about it, and I know Washington is actually doing some interesting stuff right now, and they have a state mandate, so I'd love to talk to people about that. But I think of UMW Blogs as an open educational publishing platform that never had to define itself as such. We kind of backed into openness in a beautiful way. We're open, our system's blogs always default to open, but people control whether they make it private or public. And we've had amazing results in terms of traffic. We've had, over the last year, 3.3 million page views with 1 million unique visits. We're a little public liberal arts college of 4,000 people that no one has heard of. But we are fueling the web with open educational resources in some interesting and intimate ways. And it's exciting because it didn't happen because we got a state mandate. It happened because we had a group of students and a group of faculty that were on fire and that were sharing. And here's a perfect example. We've done a lot of great work with faculty, and it's kind of our faculty at Mary Washington really deserve all the credit because they're out there doing this stuff and imagining it in new ways. Here's a perfect example. This is Fredericksburg, Stafford, and Spotsylvania historical markers. How many of you, I'm not from the Northwest, I'm actually originally from Brooklyn, and then I came, well not from Brooklyn, from Long Island, but I lived in Brooklyn for a while. But then I came down to Virginia. How many of you are familiar with Virginia? I know there's at least a few of you. So then you know that they're crazy about history, right? In Spotsylvania, Fredericksburg, and Stafford, the Civil War is still going on. It's a current event, right? You open up the newspaper, it's like, Lee is at the Delaware. It's weird. Well, little kind of side story. When I first moved to Fredericksburg, it was on December 13th, 2005. I got the job, right? So I moved, and my wife is from Italy, and she's like, what are we doing in the South? And Fredericksburg's not really the South, I would tell her. It's kind of close to D.C. Turn around, there's Union troops marching up our street. And there's Confederate troops that are shooting them at the top of the hill. And there are people running like, run away! It's a madhouse! They were reenacting the Battle of Fredericksburg from 1862, which actually happened on the street that I still live on. It's one of the bloodiest streets in America. And it was just fascinating to be in this new world. Well, we had a project actually that went about and students documented these historical markers. They went out, they researched them, they created bibliographies, and they built a site on UMW blogs. This is one of our most popular sites. What's more is it reaches out to the local community. We have people around Fredericksburg that use it regularly and say, hey, you know what, University of Mary Washington is actually doing stuff. Right? It's this kind of testament to what we're doing. And here's a good example, 13,900 visits any given month. I mean, it's amazing how much traffic we get on these sites. Another site that's really interesting is a research site that's built by students, just like the Fredericksburg, the historical marker site was, and this is by Professor Marjorie Ogg. This is called Venice. This site is amazing to me because it's the most trafficked site on a regular basis. And we talk about using blogs, and I'll talk about all the different kind of incarnations of blogs we've imagined, but this is a really interesting one in that we have students on here talking about building an exhibit of Venice. And one of the things, I don't know how many of you have been to Venice, Venice, when they're redoing a building, they put a huge ad on the building, right? They cover it up with this big, almost like a blanket, but the blanket's an ad. And so the class and the students were talking about what a kind of nightmare that was. And the actual person from Britain who runs the advertising company said, listen, this is funding Venice. So they got into a discussion with this advertising agent from Britain about advertising on the Venice walls. And that kind of interaction, I'd like to say, is unique and amazing. But with an open publishing platform like UMW Blogs, it happens all the time, on a regular basis. And it's really remarkable to me. 50,000 visits, people coming in. I mean, this is an open educational resource that people are using, and our students are researchers. They're populating the web with interesting stuff. Another thing that happened with UMW Blogs that we didn't predict, but I really think is fun, is students started to use UMW Blogs as they studied abroad. So we had about 30 students this one semester who just started UMW Blogs and were documenting their trip. What's more is they were taking photographs, video, everywhere from Australia to China to Japan to England to Argentina to Brazil, all over the world. And they were using it to communicate with their family. So their family would go there and they would have these conversations and they would share their trip. Well, we started aggregating it last year. And it was interesting. We didn't even tell them you have to do it or stuff. We said if you want to, just drop off your URL. Put in a password that's already out there in the open so we don't get spam. And we had 30 people drop off their URL, and we aggregated over 350 posts in one semester of this amazing experience, this authentic experience that was happening all over the world. Images, video, I mean, it was just remarkable, right? But one of the things that I've always been interested with UMW Blogs, and it's always been kind of what I think is its value, is this notion of giving students and faculty a domain of their own. With all due credit to Virginia Woolf, who's a room of one's own, is really playing off of. And this idea is that you have your own space. You have your own space online that you can map your own site onto, and then you can use as a portfolio of all the academic work you've done over time. And this started back in 2007. There was an art student whose name was Rob, and he called his site Roblog. And like I said, we didn't tell anyone how to use it, but if you notice, he's putting his paintings, his sculpture, his presentation, everything he's done there. And this is something when he was ready to go, he said, you know what, I want to export this and put it on WordPress.com or set up my own site. I started to think, like, this is an amazing model, right? So then you start having students doing this on a regular basis. And notice this is hosted on UMW blogs, but notice the URL, laurafalcon.com. We have students who are like hirehassan.com. They actually map on their own domains, they own the space, and this mapping on the domain seems simple enough, but in my way, it's simple enough to do, but in my idea, it's magical. Because what it does is it allows a consistent address, a consistent web presence for a student over time. And it's my sense that why shouldn't we have students come in with their own URL, map it on a space here, but take it all with them when they go, so the links and the relationships remain. And so more and more we're starting to see students creating their own portfolio of work they've done, and we have students that can blog for as many as 15 or 20 classes over the course of 4 years. This is a lot of work they've done. Here's another great example. Here's a student who did blog for 15 classes, Serena Epstein. She built a portfolio, and then when she was done, she exported everything out. She started her own web host at Bluehost, got her own domain, and that stuff was hers. This idea of telling students I love you, when you do something in Blackboard for 6 months or for 5 months, whatever the course of the semester, and then the semester's over, what happens to it? Deleted. Right? That doesn't tell students you love them. It tells students you don't like their work, you don't respect it. I want to be in a university that people are paying good money to learn in a community. I want to be in a university where it says, you know what, we love your work, we respect it, we want you to take it with it, to be a part of it. Not enough of us do it. And it's our fault. We can blame the technology, it's our fault, because there are ways now to do it. And it's not just students. We have faculty doing this as well. They're creating their own space, they're mapping their own domain, and this becomes their professional portfolio, where their academic work is happening, etc. We have writers, and actually, Warren Rochelle, who's a science fiction writer, started off just doing it as a place. But as a result of having his own site and mapping his domain, he's now blogging. And I think that's interesting. You have these spaces, you control them, you see that people find you and read you and comment, and then you start blogging. I mean, that's how it happens. Now, one of the side effects of being open, I think, is being found. And as an example, this is kind of interactive, I want someone to Google the term band art. But don't look at the images, because if you see Mapplethorpe and you blame me, I don't want to be responsible. So don't look at images, just look at the web links. Band art. Can you tell me what the first hit is? Ladies and gentlemen, if I can do a drum roll.
Band and Dangerous Art.
Band and Dangerous Art. And what is the URL?
Band Art at UMW blogs. So.
Band art. We at UMW Blogs, our publishing platform is the first link. We own Google. Our Google juice is amazing because we have thousands of people regularly publishing on a platform, and we only have 4,000 students. Could you imagine at the University of Washington with X thousand amount of students, at the University of Oregon with X thousand amount of students, or Portland Community College with X thousand amount of students, what they would do? How their presence could be kind of completely promoted, and how we could repopulate the web with great stuff? I mean, this happens because WordPress is native to the web. The LMS is not. The LMS is an alien invader. It's a virus. Okay, so there's the band and dangerous art, right? Now, it doesn't stop there. I'd like someone to Google search Black Mountain Poets. Black Mountain. Anyone remember the Black Mountain Poets? There was an amazing group of poets that came out of the Black Mountain College, which was an experimental college in the 50s that took place in the Black Mountains of North Carolina. And the idea of the college was, you go there, you learn from who you want, you do what you want, you leave when you're ready. That's a perfect idea of school, right? Well, Black Mountain College, can anyone tell me what is does anyone see the UMW link for Black Mountain College? It's the third link in Google, underneath Wikipedia, right? So, I mean, I'm fascinated, let me go back. This is actually being done by students. And we're doing stuff that's being found in Google. Now, someone brought up Wikipedia earlier. I want to talk about this because there is an amazing, I think the gentleman in the back talked about it, and I want to see that resource. Because John Beasley Murray, who's at the University of British Columbia, who's also a Northwestern Brethren, did this amazing project in Wikipedia called Madness, Mayhem, Murder, which if you don't like the title already, you're lost, right? And what he did is he had his students get into Wikipedia and work on like 8 or 9 articles that were not very good and bring them up not only to good status but to featured status. And it's extremely difficult to get an article to feature status. Well, that was his kind of goal. So he had, at the end of the semester, 3 articles that became featured, and he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that became good, which is really extremely hard. Now, one of the things that happened that I think is fascinating is most of the students spent most of their time in the library finding resources for that Wikipedia article to make it great. Well, they had this group of kind of the FA team, kind of playing featured article team, playing on the A team. They show up, you don't know who they are, and they're there to help you. Well, these people who might be graduate students, who might just be open culture freaks, they came and they started training the students on how to use Wikipedia, on how to get a featured article. So let's think about this. What is the technology cost for this project? Nothing. What is the resources of EdTech from the FA team? How much does that cost? Nothing. And you have this unbelievable resource where you're training students to use Wikipedia, which is kind of where social knowledge is being created right now. And it costs you nothing, and it's an unbelievable experience in both learning how to deal with community and learning a different kind of series of social conventions that this community demands, as well as how to use MediaWiki. I mean, it's a remarkable project, and it's zero, and no one's talking about it. I think it's amazing. Well, one of the things, and I talked about this quickly while I went up before, and I'm going to take some time to talk about an experiment that we've been doing at Mary Washington called digital storytelling, or DS106 as it's affectionately known, and also hashtagged on Twitter. What is DS106? Well, I blame this hippie. You guys might have met Gardner Campbell last year. I worked with Gardner Campbell for 6 months at the University of Mary Washington before he moved on, and he was a really important figure and a mentor for me in terms of the stuff he did and the way he thought about stuff. In particular, the way he thinks about analytics. This is a fake book title that was created as an assignment, but this whole idea of love analytics. He doesn't want to talk about metrics. He wants to talk about relations between people and how that creates community. And so this is an imaginary book that he wrote that someone created as he was talking in a presentation about love analytics. And it was done by a guy named Noise Professor, part of DS106. We'll get back to that. But there's one particular article for me that Gardner Campbell wrote that really got me excited and kind of framed what DS106 will be and could be and kind of became. It was this idea of the personal cyber infrastructure. I heard someone talk about cyber infrastructure earlier. Well, the personal cyber infrastructure is a kind of article that basically says, why aren't we making students sysadmins of their own education? Why aren't we letting them get their own domain, letting them get their own web hosting, and letting them control and create and experiment with these open tools? Why aren't we doing that? And the fact that we're not doing it, and we're putting them in the LMS, and we're putting them in the prefabricated system, is in many ways starving out the creative possibilities that would be born out of this. I took it to heart. I think it was right. And his presentation, I don't know if any of you have ever heard it, it's called No More Digital Facelifts, kind of playing on that Brazil scene, remember that? And this animated GIF is awesome. It was done by Julia Forsythe. But he was kind of like, why aren't we breaking out of LMSs like Blackboard? Why aren't we kind of rethinking the paradigm, right? And there's a bit of audio that I hope plays, because someone in DS106 remixed the audio, and this was from his talk at Open Education in 2009. Hopefully we'll be able to hear the audio, and you'll be able to get a sense. It's mixed on top of NASA's If I Rule the World.
This is always the great deadly zone. Our biochemistry, the neurons. We live in an age of marvels and wonders that don't seem to be making a substantial difference. What a waste. Why is this not happening? We've had the internet, we've had computers, we've had all of this amazing conversation about the possibilities. Is this making a difference? When's the tide turn? When do we actually get to the place where we can say, yeah, we're on the upswing? But we're going to forge through this. We're really going to make it. I've got a good feeling about this. I believe that that is true. It makes me do what I do. Day after day, I say, well, I have a bag of gold. Would you like a bag of gold? And people say, where do you find time for bags of gold? Gold, is that sustainable? 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 No, you spend it. Well, what would you spend it on? What would you like to spend it on? I don't have time for your philosophical questions, Gardner. Higher education is a place where we train people to be able to take advantage of this to the fullest and surprise us with the things we haven't discovered about what this can mean. But whatever it means, and we may disagree about what it means, look at that. It's a bag of gold. What part of that do you not understand?
I love this presentation. For me, it is such a pivotal presentation because Gardner Campbell, you probably met him last year, and he's very well-spoken, extremely articulate. He has this great metaphor always running through his talks. But for some reason at Open Ed, I don't know if someone lost his luggage or he got in a fight with some dog on the street. He was raw. And he was like, I'll give you a bag of gold. And all you're going to say is telling you why you can't use a bag of gold, why you don't want to master a new currency, why you're tired. And to me, it just seems so apparent. We talk about this stuff, we dream about it, but when it comes to actually doing it, how many of us are experimenting and pushing outside of this? As an ed tech, I believe it's our obligation. Now I understand we all have day jobs, but how do we make our day jobs become something like a bag of gold? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how at Mary Washington we did that, I believe. And we did it in relationship to Gardner's notion of not only the personal cyber infrastructure, but also this question of the human potential is at this different mode. We're at this different state, and the network augments that. So DS-106 is a class I've taught now for 5 semesters, and I teach it as an adjunct after my work hours. And what it basically is it asks students to get their own web host and their own domain. And they set up their own space, and they come to the class, and we aggregate everything they're doing in their own space into one WordPress blog. This becomes the mother blog aggregator. And what's interesting about DS-106, in my mind, is it's based around this idea, at least it was in spring, of an open online course. Have any of you heard of the MOOC? Right? A MOOC is a massive open online course. George Siemens, Stephen Downs, and I think Dave Cormier, as well as David Wiley, really experimented with this from like 2000 up until now, and they still are. And this is the MOOC cow. I guess Gordon Lockhart's responsible for this. And the MOOC has kind of taken off, so much so that you have Stanford doing a MOOC that had like 150,000 people, which is really hard to think about that scale. 150,000 people in a course. The thing about that is the massiveness. Now in terms of MOOCs, I'm not so interested in the massive. DS-106 was never massive, right? And I think the massive might be overstated. I think of it as an online open course. And what happened is we had, when we did this on December 10th, 2010, we opened it up. We got 400 people sign up for the course. There were 75 students who were taking it for credit at Mary Washington, and another 400 out in the open. And anyone could take it, they could do whatever they wanted, there was no sense you have to do the whole thing. You do it for whatever you want, for however long you want, and then you drop out. That's it, there was no pressure. And what was interesting is, we actually didn't think of it as an open educational resource. And that's kind of one of the things I'm struggling with right now. It's not that, it's an open educational experience. One of the most amazing things about DS-106, and for those of you who've been experimenting with blogs and wikis and stuff, you might see this, is that as soon as someone, before the class even started, so the class started January 10, 2011. Before it started, there were 200 posts of animated GIFs. You know those crazy animated GIFs that used to be the mailboxes, but now they become like an art form, they call them a cinematograph. They're beautiful, and we had 200 people do them. They were writing tutorials, they were sharing with them. before the class even started. Now, January 10th, when the students at Mary Washington walked into the class, they were like, what the hell is happening? There's all these posts. As soon as they wrote their first post, there was like 15 people commenting, saying, welcome to the class, have you seen this? Can I help you with this? It was this unbelievable community of collaboration that kind of was born out of people wanting to create. And one of the things about DS-106 that I thought was interesting is it forced people to make things. It wasn't purely about reading and theory. What's more is it forced people to make things that other people suggested. One of the things I thought was really radical about this class, and it's been a lot of fun, is this submitted assignment idea. What we had is we put up a Google Doc, and we said anyone in the class could submit an assignment under these 7 different categories: audio, video, writing, mashup, fan fiction, design, and visual. And all over the course of, I think, about 6 months, we had 200 assignments submitted. And I was used to doing this class with only 7 or 8 assignments. And it changed the whole nature of the class. This was a crowdsourced assignment. And what's interesting is they started submitting awesome stuff, right? They were submitting anything from movie fortunes, that was like fortune cookies that had quotes from movies that you had to design, warning signs, and there were so many. Now, at first, I was a bit of I wasn't sure. We had some, and I'll talk about the movie playlist, but one of my favorites was this 4-icon challenge. Let me test you guys right now. There's a White Russian, a rug, a pinky, and a bowling ball. What movie is that?
Big
The Big
Lebowski.
Lebowski. It can only be the Lebowski. Well, we had students doing these 4, this was a design assignment, you'd throw it out there and students would do it. Not only would students do it, they would rank how they feel about it, and then they would tag it correctly. So everyone who did that assignment would be linked right under. It became this open repository of assignments. And so some assignments got done a lot. And here's a little story about that. This is a drive-by assignment. I have no idea who this person was. They said, I really like the 4-icon visual assignment. Let me do one for 1984. I never saw them again. Is that like someone's like, we had people complaining, I failed the class, I didn't stick with it. It's an open class. It doesn't matter. You do what you do and then you leave. If you're taking it for credit, that's a different story. But I love that this person just did one, didn't even sign up, sent it to me, and then was gone. Now, one of the things that's interesting about these assignments is they often become these relationships. This is an assignment that was due on Valentine's Day for DS-106 card. And these are based on the 1980 DC comics. You remember getting these? I do. And like 2nd grade, 3rd grade, people would give me that. I loved it. So we are a team, you're nice. It's kind of the theme. Like the whole idea was that the community was nice to one another, the community was supportive, and helped other people create. Now, what happened is students took that assignment and they started playing with it, right? Here's a good example. Superman, the whole question, this became a debate, who's saying you looked hotter online? Is it Wonder Woman or is it Superman? So there's unclear. I immediately thought Superman, then a few women in my class was like, no, it's Wonder Woman. So I really thought that was fun. But they started playing with this. And these assignments became remixed, mashed up, and they went viral in the class. And here's a perfect example of that. So notice, we have people all over the world taking this class. A student whose name is Colleen Tracey, and she's awesome. She did amazing work throughout the semester. She came up with an assignment that she was very proud of. It was called the Poetry Playlist. You would go into your iTunes or to your media player, and you'd pick titles of songs and turn it into a poem or a short story. So that was the idea. And when I first thought about it, I was like, what a stupid assignment. I was like, I could do better than that. Like, I was kind of like, a little bit at first. I didn't understand what was happening. People were submitting assignments and other people were doing them. They loved that. But I was kind of being a little bit judgmental. We'll turn around a week later, 59 people from all over the world had done her assignment, and they loved it. So what I thought didn't really matter, because she was getting all this external kind of reinforcement. People were doing it and playing it. People said, let's do a playlist, but also I want you to actually create a cover for that song, or build an album. And so people started mixing up her assignment. And what she had is people in Portugal and Australia telling her, A, her work was awesome, and doing it. And I don't know how to reproduce that. That is something that just happens, right? That might be her. Poetry Playlist, and here's another good example. This is the assignment, and then here's all the people who did it from all over the world. And I was just blown away by this. Now, we also had DS-106 becomes this, the design assignments are very fun. So recently you know that there's this Occupy thing going on, right? And we had DS-106 Radio, which I'll talk about in a second, went down to Occupy Wall Street and we interviewed people. Actually, Michael Branson Smith did. And as a result, he made a design assignment to do something for Occupy Wall Street. So we did a bunch of what I think is amazing, right? Fat Chance using Monopoly to kind of create these Monopoly cards. This is my favorite. Fat Chance public education funding sees a renaissance, right? Don't we all feel that pain right now? And I'm just amazed. This stuff is happening well after the class. This happened over the summer, or this spring, this fall, and the class had been well over. We'll talk about how the class itself is still going in different ways. I don't know, can you guys make out what this is? DS-106. This is a lawn in Melbourne, Australia. How trippy is that? So there's Peter Rowan, who actually got out, one of his design assignments was to mow DS-106 into his lawn. And he did this for fun. He was taking it for fun. He also has done some amazing stuff with field reports. So in February, when it was kind of the heart of winter in Virginia, which doesn't get that cold, it was the height of summer in Melbourne. So he was out with his iPhone on the radio, letting us listen to the cicada in his backyard. Or that he was skateboarding around Melbourne and doing this stuff. It was just amazing. He's right now in South Korea, and so we get this kind of awesome field updates from Korea, but I'll talk about the radio in a second. DS-106 radio. This blew my mind. This is the coolest thing that ever happened. You talk about collaboration and coming out of an open course, right? So DS-106 radio came because I did a tweet to Brian Lamb. The thing is when I was talking with Downs and George Siemens and Dave Cormier and Al Kouros, and they were like, you really need a synchronous online Illuminate. I was like, man, really? I hate Blackboard. I hate Illuminate. I hate Adobe Connect. I hate that we have to use those faces. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. I almost did a tantrum and sat on the floor. Like, I hate it. But I was like, I don't want to use this. So Brian said, well, we've always wanted to do a radio station. Why don't we just create a radio station and maybe use that? So Grant Potter, who's in Northern British Columbia, University of Northern British Columbia, said, hey, I'm working on a project like that. I'm going to build a radio station. And he did, using an IceCast server and a Dropbox. So anyone in the class could drop off music in a Dropbox, drop it to me, and then we would automatically FTP that into this IceCast server that would automatically have a playlist of music or of educational resources playing on the radio using Auto DJ 24 hours a day. And so DS-106 now had a radio station. What it also had as a result is we figured out, or Grant Potter did, who's amazing, figured out ways, and I think the next slide is of him, and I'm glad. That's Grant Potter with his Grant Parsons shirt on, rocking out. He's also an amazing musician. He figured out ways that with our cell phone or with your laptop, you could actually intervene into the radio station and broadcast live. So I could broadcast this talk. We would broadcast the class sessions out to anyone who wanted to listen via radio. And Twitter became the back channel for discussion. We just used the tag DS-106 radio or DS-106. And so what happened is the radio station became this substitute for Illuminate or for Adobe Connect. And it was easy to use. You just get a PLS file and run it through iTunes or VLC or whatever. And it was very little overhead. No JavaScript or Java app that's trying to break. It just became this really elegant solution to a problem that we didn't want to have to go the route of that virtual classroom where you raise your hand and illuminate. It just all seems so fluorescently lighted, right? We wanted something else. We wanted some character. We wanted an aesthetic. And one of the things that DS-106 does is it brings a sense of culture and aesthetic back to the classroom. And I can't tell you how important that has been. Now, Grant Potter, the genius behind all that, he's an amazing cat, really is. And one of the things that happened is storytelling started to happen on the radio in amazing ways. I went to graduate school with Mikhail Gershevich, who actually is an immigrant. He came here when he was 8 years old, and his father was 39, his mother was 38, left Riga, Latvia, and came here both to Rome, went first to Italy, and then came to California. And him and his family told the story of their coming. They were Jews who were basically got an ability to leave because of the anti-Semitism in that country, and were able to be kind of supported back in California. And this is an amazing story. And the greatest thing is they're telling it while they're drinking whiskey. So they start to get increasingly drunker and drunker as a Russian family. And it's funny and funny because the accents get crazier, but it's really an amazing tale. And the mother talks about remembering when Stalin died on TV and what that meant. I'm like, this is gold. Absolute gold. Now, it doesn't end there. Brian Lamb, who's up at the University of British Columbia, did an amazing presentation over the radio to the class, where he brought in mashup artists from all over the world, and they played their mashups, their audio mashups for the class, and they talked to them. And he had these interviews. And it was amazing. We had like 50 people listening in on the radio. We had another 75 people in the classroom. And there was this really kind of seamless relationship between teaching, right? And it's cool because the radio is this retro technology that we're reimagining, because it's not really radio, it's web radio. But we're using the aesthetic and the idea of radio, and now anyone with a cell phone can get on the radio and can broadcast, field report, right, from wherever they are. It's very simple. Now, one of the things about DS-106 is the backbone for communication is often Twitter. Now, however you feel about Twitter, waste of time or not, Twitter continues to blow my mind. And I don't like to necessarily be on third-party apps, but this has been a great one for DS-106. Why? It's because now I have had 5 semesters of students. And that hashtag DS-106 keeps the layers of students involved in the class. So I have students from the fall of 2010 doing assignments regularly in spring 2011 or even this fall. The students stay with the class. They take it as they see fit, and it creates this larger community. They comment on other students' work, and Twitter becomes a space where you can really seamlessly see it. What's more is everything that's happening on DS-106 radio is a hashtag. This is really cool. I'm very proud of this next point. There, as you see, DS-106 radio, this is a bot. What this bot does is it basically pings the server every second and says, what's going on, what's the song playing, or has anyone gone live? And this is a really cool bot that was designed by a student in DS-106. They programmed it as part of this computer science class, and they actually created, and the student got all sorts of feedback from other EdTech folks. Here's how it works, here's that Twitter API, and this post, which you see here, is him documenting and reflecting on how he created this amazing Twitter bot for the class to use. And it's awesome that this was not an assignment. I wasn't like, you need to create a Twitter bot. It came up because the class was open, it was unpredictable, and the community started to dictate, hey, it was innovation as it went. I never planned to have a radio station. Never planned that the student would make a Twitter bot. But it happened because we kind of let go of some of our preconceptions of what a syllabus needs to be or what planning needs to be. And it really was amazing. He also made a video game. And his video game was a Flash video game. And what I really liked about the video game is, this is kind of why I played the bags of gold. The idea is you search for a bags of gold, but you're stuck in Blackboard and you're finding a way out. So it's this kind of medieval vision of Blackboard, and you're looking for bags of gold to get out of the beneath. And so he kind of took, and this is Aaron Clemmer, who's just amazing and did amazing stuff. He's a programmer now in Denver. But he did amazing stuff, and he had fun. Because you understand there was a theme. This idea of Blackboard, this idea of bags of gold. And the students could play on the theme and did, and enjoyed it. Every class should have a theme. And I don't mean like a theme of scholarly discourse, but like a theme. Now, after radio, obviously, comes TV. This is a really interesting story because we started with radio, and then we said, well, why can't we play with TV? And we did. We started on Justin TV, which sucks because it has all sorts of ads, and every 30 seconds you're going to watch a Tide ad or some annoying ad. We hated that, but we used it. But Tim Owens, who actually is now an instructional technologist with us at University of Mary Washington, started to experiment around live video streaming. And I think some of the most interesting work we're doing right now at Mary Washington is Tim Owens' work, and it has to deal with live streaming. We started here, and we broadcasted a whole bunch of stuff, and anyone could broadcast. This is, once again, we left the keys to the castle. Just like with DS-106 radio, all the passwords for everything is out in the open. We hide passwords for nothing. For DS-106 site, for the radio, for the TV, anyone can access it. And that's part of the logic of this class. There is no one holding the keys. Now, This is our first DS-106 TV broadcast from the Grand Canyon. This is Todd Conway. And it's great because in the beginning he gets in a little bit of a scuffle with his daughter, but hold the camera right. And then he's there and it's snowing. It's very rare that it snows there. So it was kind of very nice opening TV in the Grand Canyon. Now the TV got interesting, and what happened is the TV morphed into something that we now use regularly. The Division of Teaching and Learning Technologies, DTLT, is what I work with. And we now have a daily 15-minute TV show that we host through an Amazon EC3 server using Wowza, which is the media server, and it allows us to not have ads and to get up there. We use an IRC chat, and we basically run our own live streaming video. Let me prove that to you right now. You can stream from anywhere to the server. Like, I can stream you all from my iPod Touch using an app called Live View, and I will do that right now. So if I'm right, stream started, you're all on the stream, but let me prove it to you. Hold on. Give me a second. I'm going to go, because I have it set up, because I'm that good. And it should be, now, if I go here, and I refresh this, you should all be on the stream. This, you should all be on the stream. So I'm live streaming you. You should all be on the stream. So I'm live streaming you. You should all be on the stream. It's going to be a little bit crazy. And this is from an experimenting with live streaming. And this is us experimenting with live streaming. But I kind of like the confusion. I like the chaos. But the point being here is that, you know, this is something Tim Owens, who, this is a really cool story. And for me, it really gets to the heart of what DS-106 is about. Tim Owens was fixing laptops at Longwood University in Virginia. And he took DS-106 because someone recommended it. And his work was so awesome and he was so cool that I was like, why don't you apply for a job at Mary Washington? And he did. It got him out of that kind of fixing computers, which is a completely noble profession, but he's an EdTech. And he came and he's been on the ground running for the last 4 months. And that's what DS-106 is. It's professional development, it's community, and there's a group of people who are able to come forth and show what they do and how they do it. I love that about it. Because you know what? It's the real deal. You know, it's not, oh, take this class and pretend you're in the real world and that nonsense. No, it's actually, you do. And you really kind of make something. And I love that. Now, we're not limited to radio or TV. Cast Iron Coating, which is a local Portland, I want to give them a big plug. They're a local Portland development company. They have got us up and running on UNW blogs for the last 5 years. Zach Davis has dealt with my crap for as long as I can. Well, he said, you know, I love what you're doing with DS-106. He hosts that as well. He said, we host everything externally, by the way. He said, why don't you guys try out Minecraft? So we did. I never did anything really in Minecraft. I went in there once, and Noise Professor, who did this big DS-106 monument, actually got me in there and showed me how to use it and stuff, but we had a tremendous amount of traffic and activity in there that was just basically part of the class. People did awesome machinima videos in DS-106 Minecraft server that were telling stories about Minecraft and about their work in Minecraft. It was really amazing. Some of the best kind of stories came out of Minecraft and using that space. And like, it's not one I had to pretend to be an expert of, which I really love. You know, I couldn't be an expert. I couldn't really cater to all 400 students. The community had to. Now, then it gets crazy. Okay, so you think it's crazy now, right? You're kind of like, what's he talking about? The summer of Oblivion got nuts. How many of you know David Cronenberg? David Cronenberg? Okay, David Cronenberg is a great, one of my favorite horror Canadian directors. He did Existenz, he did The Brood, he did Dead Zone, he did Videodrome, which I'll talk about in a second. He did a bunch of great films. He's kind of real auteur. He does amazing stuff, and he usually does like Dead Ringers. Usually has to do with like science and medicine. He did The Fly, the remake of The Fly, etc. So he got me kind of thinking. He did this film called Videodrome. Videodrome, James Woods, and there was this other character called Dr. Oblivion. Dr. Oblivion was actually, Cronenberg went to school under Marshall McLuhan in Toronto. And Dr. Oblivion was kind of loosely based on Marshall McLuhan. And the whole idea of Dr. Oblivion that I love in the movie is that for 27 years, he's never had anyone see him face to face. He's only presented through some sort of mediated form, like TV. I just love the whole idea. So my first time teaching my second time teaching a completely online course at Mary Washington, I was like, you know what? It would be really cool to teach the class not as Jim Groom, but as Dr. Oblivion. And pretend I have not seen anyone for 27 years face to face, and that this fully online experience is kind of something that you get used to. So what I did one morning is I shaved my head, I got a mustache, and I came down. My wife was like, what the hell's going on? I didn't tell her I was doing this. And I changed my that's kind of what Dr. Oblivion looks like. I changed my whole look, I went on web video, and I started teaching the class as Dr. Oblivion. Students didn't know that Dr. Oblivion wasn't a real person. So three classes in, I had a mental breakdown. My identity, I already have identity problems, but once I started doing this and really thinking I was Dr. Oblivion, I dressed up in a suit, I had my shaved head. The colleagues, when I walked into work the first time, didn't recognize me. They're like, sir, what the? It was really trippy. So I had a breakdown day 3. And then Martha Burtis said, look, you don't have to do Dr. Oblivion anymore. Why doesn't Dr. Oblivion go missing? And so he did. Dr. Oblivion went missing. It became an assignment that students did, and these missing posters were posted all over New York City. They were posted in California, in physical spaces. Have you seen Dr. Oblivion? If so, and people started tweeting sightings. There was this really weird, became an emergent alternative reality game, where the course itself became the story. It was this amazing thing, and Dr. Oblivion, so what happened is Jim Groom, the TA, I came back to my own thing. I was now the TA while Dr. Oblivion was missing. I came in and took over the class again. But what happened is I kind of got the power went to my head. And I started banishing students from the class for not listening to me. So what happened was, and this is another thing that I never dictated, students started making videos documenting Jim Groom, the TA, as a tyrant. And this is one of those videos. And this was done by Alan Liddell, who's a student. He's remarkable. He now works for us at Mary Washington's DTLT. And take a look at this video. This is fun. This kind of gives you a quick video sense of what happened in the class. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna replay it from the beginning because the news on the
DS-106ers en masse. The family news on the march. Sectionalism rocks the Oblivionite camp as TA Jim Groom goes mad with power and banishes DS-106ers en masse. The family Oblivion bickers while DS-106 burns, and so clearly new leadership is needed. First martyr to the cause after the Oblivions is Araba, who was banished from DS-106 after questioning Groom's seemingly absolute authority. So let it be noted in the annals of history that DS-106 is hereby dissolved, its power over our minds illusory, and its message of total student domination illegitimate. From the ashes of DS-106 arises a new order, DS-107, led by none, controlled by none, for the benefit of all who seek relief from the oppression of the TA. We are the true heirs of the legacy of Dr. Oblivion, and we declare before the world that our purpose is to depose the monster and see him displayed in chains for all to see. With that in mind, carry on the legacy of Dr. Oblivion with your radio and video assignments, as we wait in joyful hope for his return to us. With Oblivion on our side, we cannot fail. And to all enemies of DS-107, seek not to bar our way, for we shall win through, no matter the cost.
Okay, so this just blows my mind. This is a student who, after I did the banishing, and Araba, who he mentions, she was the first one. She came on through Skype. You have to realize every class, 5 days a week, was a TV show. We did this with Wirecast. We broadcast out. We brought Skype people in. It was really an amazing setup, and that's what got us excited about live web streaming video. But we had students come in through Skype, so it was interactive when they came in, and I started saying, look, Araba, you're not listening to me. You're banished. Half an hour later, this video was made. And news on the March videos started to be made. This was not an assignment once again. They were made regularly to update the class on what was happening. So other students were making highlight news on the March videos for the rest to follow. And this is amazing because it gave Jim Groom an out so that ultimately Dr. Oblivion could come back, but also other people helped teach the class. Martha Burtis did this one. Now it got kind of complicated, the narrative did. And I'm going to kind of get to that narrative. It got really complicated. Anyone ever heard of the tool Storify? Storify is this remarkable tool, if you've heard about it, that allows you to link tweets, video. She was actually, had us locked into a case, and then she killed all the students, which you probably shouldn't do. So it kind of became complicated, and then Jim Groom and Dr. Oblivion had their final kind of discussion. Let's listen to this for a second. And this was the end of the class. And a couple of details about the class before I end on this. Okay, it should be coming.
Jim Groom, what happened?
Yeah.
Why did you banish the people from DS 106?
Well, I'm not really sure what happened that day, Dr. Oblivion. I know you put a lot of trust into it. And I know that you kind of entrusting me with your class in your particular way, and selecting me to be TA over Martha Burtis was a big choice for you, and I totally respect that. Realizing not at all what that choice would lead to, ultimately for both of us. But that said, I know that I owe a public apology to everybody out there in DS 106 who I banished on that fateful day almost 2 weeks ago. I want to say I'm sorry. I wasn't myself. I wasn't who I usually am as Jim Groom. I'm usually this soft, cuddly, very special little person, but that day I was a beast. I was a monster. Uh-huh. Kind of a little bit off there.
Jim Groom,
No. Well,
you take responsibility
Dr. Oblivion,
for the banishment.
what you have to
You realize
realize
what you did was wrong.
is that when you left or disappeared, and that's still a little hazy, I think, for everybody. So ultimately, Dr. Oblivion says, I want to get to it, but I went too much time. He says you can't go around killing all your students, right? You know that, Jim Groom. Which is kind of, this is how it ended. And you notice this class was 5 weeks, it was a summer class, and it was completely experimental. And what was amazing about it for me is that the class became the narrative, and that the question that's at the heart of DS 106 in my mind is this notion of digital identity. Is this notion of students framing these experiments, doing these assignments, but also thinking about who they are online. The idea of the web host, the idea of the domain is about them creating a space that's theirs, and when people search for them, they find them. What's also happening through these various assignments that students do over the course of the semester is they're becoming more agile in design, visual, video, and audio. They all create bumpers for the radio, they all create radio shows, they all create mashup videos, and they're getting this form of literacy that we'll hear about later, digital literacy. I think it's extremely important because this isn't just about people. The criticism I get about this class are two. One is, it's Jim Groom, no one else can do it. The other is, but this wouldn't go to a traditional discipline. I disagree with both. This is a computer science class, and what's more, is any one of these assignments can be rethought and reimagined, put on any disciplinary class, right? The idea of thinking about the TV station and the radio station, not just as these kind of unique retro things, but as the vertical and the horizontal. As new ways, we did it with the publishing platform, NWACC, and that was crazy successful. Our next mission is to do it with the radio station. Have classes doing assignments that frame the work they're doing and sharing it out publicly via radio and also via TV. And DTLT today is already that. We have faculty coming into us telling us about the work they're doing. This is a 15-minute TV show that goes out. I want to see departments doing this. I want to see students running this. I want to see us have a full collective media empire at University of Mary Washington because it's cheap and it's eminently doable. And we don't have to compromise with third-party vendors. We can do it ourselves. And we are doing it ourselves. And it's important. And it kind of creates this new notion of sharing, just like we did with the publishing platforms. The same thing is happening now with radio and TV, and that's where we're going. That's our direction. So let me just finish up with a couple of things that I think hit the mark in terms of DS 106 and what it means the second way. DS 106 was this collaborative class, open, right? But it hasn't stopped there. We have a class now. How many of you heard of the project Looking for Whitman? It's an interesting project. I was a part of it in 2009, and what it basically did is had students from NYU, Rutgers, University of Mary Washington, CUNY, and a class in Serbia, all working off of a similar syllabus, although each dealing with different visions of Whitman, whether it's Whitman from Brooklyn, Whitman from Camden, Whitman during the DC Civil War, or Whitman internationally. And every class kind of presented, and this was kind of this intercampus across these campuses all over the country and even the world. And they shared, and the students commented on each other's work. Well, that's what DS-106 has become. This is Michael Branson Smith, and he teaches at York College. And one of the things that's interesting about DS-106 is it also has led to us having jam sessions. We have one in Vancouver and one in New York City. So when we all get together, we don't go to conferences. We all get a rehearsal room and we play live to the radio. And it's amazing because so many of these people are gifted musicians. And so many of us aren't, like me, but we still hang out and do this stuff. It's a different social model. DS-106 has done a lot of things, and as many outside the classroom as in. I think that's important. Well, he's teaching this class at York College, and he has 80 students who are now doing DS-106. I'm not teaching it at Mary Washington. He's doing it on his own. Then we had another university taught by Scott Lockman in Japan that has jumped on. So we have another 80 students taking it from the University of Japan at Temple, or so the Temple University in Japan. And it's amazing to me that they're now running and that they're using the DS-106 space and they're collaborating and they have a community built in that's commenting and sharing the work they do. This is new ways of sharing across universities. This is new ways of helping us frame kind of curriculum and sharing around curriculum and building on each other's ideas. You also have 200 assignments built in, but the assignments, and now we have these amazing assignments from Japan. We have this new haiku assignment, which is amazing. We have these manga assignments that I still can't get my head around. But it's interesting how the Japanese students bring their culture to it. And that's what you want. You want the students and the faculty to bring their own sense of culture to the class. It changes everything. Now, what is this all about? Well, like I said with the radio and the TV, and even now with the publishing platform, which is very well established, is developing an open source publishing platform or radio or TV in many ways is to gradually integrate into the school's general education curriculum the deep critical examination of how digital tools are changing the way we think and live, and they are. And what we need is we need some examples. And what we also need is we need to share around this. I offer up DS-106 as one example, and some of you bring their sense of culture and to bring the work they're doing and the assignments they're dreaming up to the classroom. And I think by opening that door and letting go a little bit of control in this notion that you're going to dictate every element of a class, or you're going to dictate every element of a technology, once you let go, amazing things happen. Whether it be a radio station emerging, a TV station emerging, Minecraft taking off, I don't care what it is. Awesome assignments that people all over the world are doing. These things will happen if we as instructors and EdTech and students kind of let go and let them happen. And so DS-106 is my kind of testament to that. And I don't think it's over, right? And I don't think it's limited to a digital storytelling class. In fact, I think the limitations are only ours and our imagination. And I think finally, if I would end on a high note, education, let's stop. When we talk about online education, why do we package it? We want to package it in integrity. We want to package it in an LMS. We want to lecture capture. Is lecture capture really interesting? No, it's boring. You're watching someone lecture for an hour, right? It's not interesting. It's not an educational experience. You want people interacting. You want people sharing, whether it's synchronous or not, right? Because we're not computers. quote from Blade Runner. And one of my favorite ways to end is to end on a song, right? By Daft Punk. And I love that Daft Punk. And I think we forget that in the course of our packaging up courses and our thinking about how we're going to deliver scale. People want to be interactive with. That's why they come to our institutions. Let's not lose it. No, let's build it. Thank you. Yeah, questions, problems? I'm sure there are many. Yes.
So you got a wonderful way of generating huge amounts of content and creativity and beautiful stuff. So talk about how do you get them to think about it? How do you get them to go meta on it? How do you get them to synthesize it? What have you learned about how to do a little bit of analysis?
Yeah, that's awesome. And that is really the point. And I don't think I brought that up enough, and I probably should. Part of DS-106 is also creating, but it's also sharing the experience in the process, right? So to get credit in DS-106 as a credit student, you not only have to create something, but you have to share how you created it, and then oftentimes create a tutorial, whether it be jigging something. And what's amazing is now, linked to those assignments in that repository is also tutorials that other people can do. And that meta part that you're talking is really where you start to kind of visualize the learning. And the assignments divorced from, even if they're great assignments, divorced from sharing how you did it, really does defeat the purpose. It short circuits the whole thing. And I think this class was particularly useful because people often could choose what they did, they were excited about what they did, so it wasn't me pulling teeth to have them share. But if they didn't share their work, at least if they were 4-credit students and how they did it, they were docked. So that was actually part of the grading. And someone's going to talk about how do you assess it, how do you grade it. Well, what we did is I assessed how active they were in the community, how much feedback they gave to other people, was there significant feedback, whether they did the 4 or 5 visual assignments and chose them, did they add 5 different assignments, and if not, why not? So there was a whole kind of relationship that they had to meet. But I wasn't saying this is good art, this is bad art. I was saying share your process, think about what you're doing, and that whole idea helped build community. And I can't stress enough, what people liked about DS-106 is not that we were particularly good artists, because there's great artists out there, we're not pretending, but it's that people were in a community that gave them positive feedback. And being nice to one another, like that whole, remember that you are nice or we are nice, we're a team, it seems kind of cheesy, but it's so powerful. When you give students reinforcement, when you give them feedback, when you're there for them, it changes the dynamic of their lives. And they love you for it, and vice versa. And I think sometimes with the online, when we're kind of stuck on the forums or discussion boards, whether it's Desire to Learn, Blackboard, it goes back to that fluorescent lighted space. These spaces don't reflect who they are. These spaces decontextualize them from the web. These spaces kind of really drown out any notion of individuality, which is part of why we're at university. It's to express who we are, to share around people. And you think about your university experience, what do you remember? You remember the people you learned with? You remember the stuff, the culture you shared around, whether it be movies, music, art, etc.? You remember those experiences. Everything we're developing in OER and Open Ed is about the resource, not the experience. DS-106 is really trying to refocus on that experience of an online course because that's the key. And when we master that, we've mastered, I think, online learning. I mean, how many people have imagined teaching the class as a character online? I don't think it's been done yet. And that is just one small example of what we can do. Why do you have to teach the class as you? Right? That's amazing to me. And no, everyone's just kind of like, you're kind of a loser. I know I'm a loser. But at the same time, this is stuff we can do. This is stuff we can imagine. And, I like working at Mary Washington because it's such a mess administratively. We've had 5 presidents in 6 years or something, that no one's watching the store. We can do whatever we want. And that's complete liberation. And so we have, and I understand not everyone's in that situation, and I'm not trying to say, why aren't you? But, DS-106 was mainly done off work hours, right? I mean, that was something, but what it did, and what I love about it, I mean, I'm EdTech, I came up EdTech, I still associate instructional technology. I think it's an awesome field. We're on the kind of cutting edge of really thinking how teaching and learning come together. I love what I do. And what more is, I love the idea that we can experiment with what we do. And then I love the idea that I'm able to come here and meet people like you and be like, wow, I mean, this is really the best field to be in. I love it. And what I love about it, though, is that the possibilities are being shaped by us on a regular basis. We're framing it. We are it. Instructional technology is a young field. 20 years old, I think really in the last 5 years, it's really starting to kind of mature a little bit, but still infant. And I think it's up to us to decide what the next step is. It's up to us to reimagine that space. And now, I couldn't think of a better place to be. It's almost harder, I mean, to be a faculty member. And I really respect the faculty members that I work with because they have a lot of work to do. They have committee work, they teach 4-4 at my university, and I'm amazed at what they're able to do with the work. But I think it's my job to kind of come to them with a solid kind of example of here's how you experiment, here's how this is going to work for you professionally. And what's happened is a lot of faculty at Mary Washington are presenting about the stuff to do professionally. They are writing about it. Because this is a new field. And there's a kind of new renaissance notion of pedagogy and how this stuff brings pedagogy to the fore. And so that's what we should be kind of, I think, helping our faculty realize. And it's not easy, but it's really what I love. It's the best part of my job. Yeah.
Do you ever run, I mean, I've tried different social media experiments at different colleges.
Yeah.
Have you run into problems with like marketing communications or the school saying like, you know, we don't want what those students are doing to have no boundaries and still be associated with our school?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I know schools that are probably far more controlled. They're controlling their message. We haven't had that problem, no. So they don't really know what we're doing. And I went into the president's office. They're not really sure what we're doing. And I went to the president's office and I had my head shaved as Dr. Oblivion. And I was giving a presentation to the president and the board. And they were like, why is your head shaved? I'm like, nah, don't worry about it. It's just experimental class I'm teaching. And they're like, oh, all right, you know. And so I've never heard about that. Like, is it ethically wrong to teach a class as Dr. Oblivion? I haven't really asked that question yet. It's a little too late. The class has been taught. But to your point, I think we're making real inroads with university relations, and we've made one of the things I'm really proud of that's happened recently is our entire university website, umw.edu, is now WordPress. And so I think that's awesome. And what we're thinking is UMW Blogs is going to start migrating to departmental sites. So every departmental site is a blog. And every blog is shared by those faculty. If you go to cas.umw.edu/art, you'll see that that's a departmental blog. They're sharing the work they do, they're sharing the art stuff, they're blogging regularly about it, they also have the regular stuff. And what's happening is we want to start seeing that departmental work live on umw.edu and become even more kind of prominent. Because I really believe that as a public institution, it is our obligation to share the work we're doing openly and freely. I think it's part of our mandate. And I know Washington State is going through that mandate right now, and that happens to be OER course library stuff, and that's fascinating stuff, but I want to do it at the atomic level. I want to do it when people come to umw.edu, that is the teaching and learning happening. In the visual. It's the life of the mind. You go to that department, you see what the students are doing, see what the faculty are thinking, and every student and faculty will have a personal site on umw.edu that they can populate. That's awesome.
A little tiny story to reinforce what happens in a department. Our romance languages department has an interim head, a guy named David Wax, W-A-C-K-S, Google him, you'll see the kinds of things that he's up to. When he became the interim department head, he started using a blog for departmental news. And all of a sudden, he says, the faculty who are working right next door to one another now know what books they're writing. Because your colleagues aren't necessarily going to read your books, but now at least they can read maybe an 800-word abstract about what your book or your research is about, and they might be a little bit interested in that. But otherwise, faculty are really working in their own fields. The Italian people are working on Italian literature. The Spanish people are working on something else, and the twain don't really meet. But they do now in this blog space in some really interesting ways.
I mean, I have a really good example of that, so thank you, Andrew. Let me just show you a quick example of something that happened, and it's really why UMW.edu took off, I think. So check this out. This is called Eagle Eye. We started this a year ago. It's called eagleeye.umw.edu. Notice, this is actually hosted on UMW blogs, but we could map any domain. So we just mapped on the umw.edu domain. Our tech group is like, yeah, that's fine. Map on domains on the UMW blogs. So there's this weird kind of amazing renaissance that's happening at UMW. Well, not only do you have the stories, but you have professional notes. You see that? Charles Shields' biography, Jim Groom on tour, right? Like, you actually are able to share the stuff you're doing. Any faculty member can author here, and any student. So we let people share professional notes and what's going on around the university, and it's taken off. And that very thing that you talk about at the departmental site is now happening here with kind of a magazine of professional. We used to send around the professional notes as a printout. You had to get it in at a certain time, and then it went out 6 months, and then another 6 months. I mean, completely absurd. We're living in the world of the internet. So any faculty member can get on here, can share what they've done, and if they do it by Thursday, you can ace the system. So Thursday is when it goes out. So if you get it in on Thursday, you'll be seen by everyone because the email comes out. So people ace the system. They've already figured it out. But it's amazing. You know, we have over 200 authors, and they're sharing the work they've done. And just like you said, it gives people a new sense of the life of the mind at Mary Wash. And that's what these tools at their best should do. And so I'm really excited, the university relations folks, to get back to your question, have really gone whole hog into WordPress. They believe in our vision of the university website being a space where teaching and learning is on display. And I think we're going to start to really see UMW blogs and UMW.edu start to merge into what I think is a really powerful online space that I want to start building the radio and TV into. And really have this kind of online framework, you know, much of which costs nothing. It only costs, and you talk about Marty Ringgold said yesterday, we got to ask ourselves what to invest in. Well, the only thing to invest in is good people. The technology will not get you there. The good people who are imaginative, who are thinking about this stuff, who are ready to push it, that's who you want to throw your money at. Not technology, not Blackboard, not desire to learn. You want to throw it at people. And we've gotten away from that with our corporate approach to IT that Andrew and I were talking about yesterday, and we need to get back. We're education, we're higher ed, we need to be making the miss, Morrison, right? We don't need to be following protocol. We should be out there doing crazy stuff. Yes?
So you leave the keys to the kingdom on the doormat. What kind of problems have you had, or how have you dealt with trolls or spam or folks who are malicious?
Okay, good question. We haven't had spam problems because we have active spam that works pretty well. So spam's been, at least for WordPress, spam's been a problem. We haven't had people spamming the hashtag on DS106 because it's not big enough. Right? It's not like something like, remember when the Iran election was going on? And you had thousands of that hashtag Iran election on Twitter, and then people would get in there and they put porn videos or they spam it. We haven't had that problem because we're not that big. Now, as far as community, we haven't had people abuse it yet. There was a kind of something early on when someone saw the whole DS106, and there's someone who I'm really close with, I was really close with, and I really liked, kind of photoshopped me and a couple other people onto Hitler. That was weird, but that's all that was. I mean, that was just weird. I mean, I think we're over it. But I didn't know why I was being, because this whole cult of personality around Jim Groom, that can be, I'm kind of a little tired of it, but people can say that. So that was the only thing, and that was personal. That wasn't like some troll coming out from the outside. That was just things that happen because we're out on the open web, and they're real. And these are real emotions. These are real people that I care about. So I don't think that it's exceptional, and I think that's what happens when you live online. You know, people have emotions, and sometimes things are kind of misunderstood. So we haven't had. Leaving the keys to the kingdom have no negative effect. Now, someone in here can prove me wrong, and I encourage you to, because it's open. DS106 radio is yours to use. DS106 TV is yours to use. And that's what makes it great, is that we're not sitting here minding it. And it also goes against all theory. Weirdest story, me and my provost were talking about UMW blogs, and I love telling the story, only because it's nuts. We were sitting down, and she was like, sooner or later on UMW blogs, someone's gonna say dildo. I was like, really? She's like, sooner or later, someone's gonna, and I was like, you know what, you're right. And she's like, you know what, and we're a higher education, we gotta be able to deal with it, and that's that. And that's how my provost approached it. And we've never had anyone say it. You know what I mean? Like, we've never, that whole fear and uncertainty and doubt that drives so much of what we do, if we would just let some of that go, we'd be amazed at what we can really do. We're always waiting for that one person to drop an F-bomb. We're higher ed. Really? That's our biggest fear? It's absurd. And that's really the kind of, I think, the cultural difference between the faculty and IT. But not all IT, because IT is awesome. So, IT often takes a bad rap. And I feel for that, because I was part of IT, now I'm under the provost. But, I think it's just a mindset that faculty and IT and everybody share to some degree. And, maybe we should exercise what tenure means a little bit more. Maybe we should kind of get more excited about work. DS-106, if anything, really brought our group together. And we were all excited. We were like doing, Summer of Oblivion was like writing a sitcom. Like, what is Dr. Oblivion going to do today? And can you imagine hanging out with your colleagues and doing something like that on a regular basis? It's fun. And like, if our work is fun, we want to come in and we're doing DTLT Today TV and we're doing radio and we feel like we're doing something of value. And we haven't become kind of, drones. And that's big. We all need that, And I speak from a position of privilege, I guess, because not everyone can. And so I don't want to downplay my privileges. But, I don't know if it's as hard in this day and age to do. There's so many people out there who want to. I mean, the social web is an amazing thing. I don't think we fully understand what it means yet.
Well, I know there's lots of questions, but remember I did say one of my jobs as whatever I am is to keep us on track. So we're fortunate that Jim Groom is good people. First, I want to thank you for a great talk. But the other good thing is Jim is hanging out with us for a while longer, so you can all continue to ask questions, continue to have the stimulating dialogue. And not that anybody is hungry, but we do have lunch, and we need to be done by 12:30. So